Tina Traster from the Rockland County Business Journal. Good morning, Tina. How are you?
Good morning, the County of Rockland. And you guys, how are you?
We're doing pretty well this morning. And yourself?
I can't complain. I hope Jeff had a good, restful vacation or wherever he went. I hope he had a good time.
Yes, he went on a cruise. He had fun on his cruise.
Cruise? Where? Where to?
I remember he went out of Jersey. He went to the Bahamas. That's it.
Oh, my.
There you go. Oh, he's coming back. He's coming back.
Yeah, I took a cruise to the Bahamas. I heard him struggling, but yeah, he got it.
There you go. Thanks, Jeff.
What a great break that must have been.
Oh, it was wonderful. As I was pointing out to Pete earlier, that the ship was, my understanding, was at 40% capacity at best. So it was great being on a mostly half-empty ship or more. It was fantastic.
Well, COVID has its benefits.
It sure does. And
I suppose.
COVID has its benefits if you've been vaccinated anyway.
Well, you know, the one thing is, I don't know if anybody else is noticing this, but is anybody noticing that the roads are more clogged than they have ever been? Or is it just that we got, used to the COVID era ease of driving around and getting things done, and then we forgot how crowded things have become? Or has anybody else noticed that you just cannot move around with any kind of speed?
I think people have gotten worse at driving. They've forgotten how to do it. Those who didn't have to do it during COVID, I think they've gotten worse at it. And therefore, you get more traffic at the lights and people not, wait, did I make a left at this light or a right at this light to get to the bakery? I don't remember. That's a lot of that.
It feels like a lot of congestion.
Yes.
Speaking of congestion, or finally some relief to the congestion that was the 10-year wait for a new shelter in the county, last week, the shovel sort of metaphorically went into the ground at the what will be the replacement shelter at Hi Tor, the long-awaited $8.3 million Rockland County Animal Shelter in Pomona. And for any of us who have been watching this issue, we know it has been a long time coming, kind of a torturous situation, especially because we've been, dealing with how many iterations of live animals, not to mention the shelter staff and the people who work there. As anybody who's lived here knows, we've been dealing with a vastly dilapidated and outdated shelter, and what is now on the horizon is a 14,000 square foot shelter designed by Rauhaus, Freedenfeld and Associates Architects, and it's going to be, I guess, about a little bit more than 3 times the size, which is really welcome news. If you go to the story that we've posted on this, you can see all of the new features, which will add so many more dimensions to the ways in which Rockland County will be able to care for its lost, abandoned, and homeless cats and dogs. The shelter itself, although there was the groundbreaking this week, the stage that we're actually up to is that they're going to take about 6 weeks to look for requests for bids for the actual construction. So there's not a contractor attached to the project yet, but the bidding period will be open for 6 weeks, and then that contract has to be approved by the county legislature, but the estimated time for building to begin, they're saying, let's keep our fingers crossed, is in the spring. That $8.3 million, the raising of that $8.3 million was hard to come by, and it took a combination of the shelter itself raising funds, Assemblyman Ken Zabrowski raising funds, and the county threw in actually the lion's share of the project. And so they're saying that the project will take 14 months, and so I guess we're looking at maybe sometime in summer of 2023, maybe, of 2023, that we might see a new shelter. Now, that's all good and wonderful. I hope I'm speaking to lots of animal lovers. Everybody in the county who knows me knows I'm certainly in that category. But there's the other side of this story, which has to be told at the same time, and that is the disarray that the Hi Tor board is in. That it is still under investigation. The DA's office is still looking into, financial dealings there. And in addition to that, and kind of even more complicated than that, is the county has put forward all of this money to rebuild. But the main source of funding for Hi Tor, apart from donations, are the towns themselves. And this is still a contentious issue here in the county. In February, the town of Orangetown terminated its agreement with Hi Tor and paid out its last contractual obligation, but going forward has signed an agreement with the Hudson Valley Humane Society to handle its stray dogs, but has made no allocation for its cats. And we also know from the reporting that we've been doing that Supervisor Howard Phillips of Haverstraw, along with potentially others who sit on the Rockland County Solid Waste Authority, which we now know is Rockland Green, there's discussion to take Hi Tor under its umbrella or under its auspices and to run it from the agency that deals with our solid waste. Now, this is all very convoluted, but the thing is that if we're going to celebrate and be excited about the new shelter, then the gigantic question that hangs in the balance is, well, what about the funding going forward, and what about the management of the nonprofit going forward? Will the same board be in place? Are the towns not going to be on board to continue to fund it? If not, how are they going to manage a new $8 million facility that actually has so many more features than the present one, which seems to just be a hand-to-mouth operation? So, again, exciting news that the new shelter is coming, but the real discussion that has to go hand in glove with the prospect of a new shelter is who's going to run it and how. How is it going to be funded? If Orangetown has opted out, and if, Haverstraw or Clarkstown were to do the same, where is the funding for the shelter? That is not something that the county is going to raise. So, big question. The only thing that we know for sure right now is that the county legislature has received a copy of a resolution from Rockland Green about wanting to take over the shelter, but this has not moved into a committee for discussion or a vote as of yet. I think we're not likely to see anything probably until after November. But I think that people who are following this story have to think about it holistically, because it's not just about the construction of this new building, which finally now there are funds for, but the question is, who is going to manage this facility? How are we going to move into the future with the state-of-the-art building, but without a good plan for how it is operated and funded? So, big question out there.
Yes, indeed, that's for certain. Do you feel that is the most likely option for the funding, or do you think one of the towns might opt in and instead? Do you have a theory as to, or a thought as to who might end up being the front runner for the funding eventually?
Yeah, I think it's a very problematic issue here in this county. There's the sense, when Teresa Kenney, took that first step and opted out of paying Orangetown's share of Hi Tor's funding, it signaled to other towns like Haverstraw and Clarkstown, okay, well, you can do the same. And, that's very problematic, because if Hi Tor is left without the bulk of its funding, then what? Then what? I mean, if Orangetown, Haverstraw, and Clarkstown don't fund Hi Tor, then Hi Tor essentially is unfunded. The county is not going to step up. That's never been the county's role financially, not to run it. So I think that there is a scramble and probably an opportunity behind the scenes that's being contemplated as to where the funds might have to come from. I mean, in many communities, the shelter, the animal shelter, becomes a solid nonprofit that is not dependent on municipal or county funding. And there are very good reasons why that might work, but in a case like that, you need a board that is really professionally proficient in fundraising, and that can raise what it takes to run a shelter year over year. I don't think that here in this county we've ever seen that in its totality. The board having the talent or the ability to become independent. I don't know. An independent takeover somehow, a nonprofit takeover. Just, I guess, speaking personally, I think would be an attractive option. In terms of Rockland Green becoming the agency that takes over Hi Tor, I think we need a lot more information to understand what particular skills that agency would bring to this, and why that would be why that would dovetail with what it does and its mission. So I think there are more questions that, rather than, and I think that when you hear that Rockland Green is interested in taking over Hi Tor, it is not natural to say, oh yeah, that makes sense. So much more information is needed there. It would be an awful shame for us to have a brand new building with all these fantastic features that finally speak to the way shelters operate in the 21st century, but then still be mired in this, well, who funds this thing and who's in charge of this thing? So, I think that that's the bit of sobering news about, that has to go with this good news, is that that's the good news, but the bad news is that Hi Tor, in terms of its future management and funding, still appears to be in flux.
Right. We actually do have WRCR's own Carrie on the line that would actually like to ask you a question if you have time. I
always have time for Carrie.
Alrighty. Hi, Carrie. You're on the air with Tina Traster from the Rockland County Business Journal.
Hey, Carrie.
Tina, how are you?
I'm good.
I'm just calling with a comment regarding this topic, and I've brought this up a couple of times over the years with Hi Tor. And you know my history with also having the Dying to Bloom business. Mm-hmm. As far as potential incoming funding for the shelter, the current site does have a crematory on the location. I have not seen it. I don't know the condition of it. But I think that could be a great way of income to support the shelter. And being that we're having a new shelter, to even take it a step up, there is a type of water cremation called alkaline hydrolysis, and that's used all over the place. It's been used for years, especially for animals. It's also legal in some states for people, but it's very common for animals, and it's supposed to be a little more environmentally friendly than flame cremation. And it's a growing option that people are using. There's a place in Connecticut right now that does water cremation for animals that, when our pets die, it's hard to know what to do with their remains. And right now in Rockland County, a lot of our veterinary offices use other facilities outside of Rockland County for the cremation process. So when our beloved pet dies, which I know is heartbreaking, you know, I've, of course, lost some pets over the years, to be able to say, you know what, I could use this crematory or this facility and actually help support other animals in my community, I think it's kind of a feel-good for me, too, instead of going to Westchester or going somewhere out of our area. It keeps the money in Rockland County and could be a win-win.
You know,
just throwing that out there.
No, it's interesting because I'm just looking over the very extensive list of the features that that was put out last week, and I'm just looking through them, and there's no mention here of anything to do with the crematorium, the existing one or a future one, but it's a good, logical, revenue-creating idea, and that's the sort of thing that Hi Tor needs. It needs to be more creative in its revenue generation.
All right, I'll try to figure out who to contact. I have no idea.
I know. Well,
thanks for your time.
What's that?
Thanks for your time. I don't want to take up all your time, so I'm going to hang up.
All right. Have a great day, Carrie.
You too.
Thank you, Carrie. And thank you, Tina Traster from the Rockland County Business Journal.
All right. We'll talk next week.
Yes, indeed, we shall. And where can people find the newsletter?
They can go on the site, rcbizjournal.com, and they can just simply put in an email address. That will get them the daily newsletter. And, of course, once on the site, they can take a look at rcbizjournal.com. They can take a look at the Hi Tor story and everything else that we are keeping you informed about.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tina. We will talk to you next week.
Have an awesome week.